my many voyages lately to a nameless big box store that sells tools and hardware, I noticed these little refugees, and I know you've noticed them there before too. In fact, I was wearing my California Carnivores tank top when I went in, and the gal there was like, "Oh, we're selling so many Venus Flytraps lately." And I said, "Oh, me too." I don't think she knew what I was talking about though. But at any rate, I kind of joked with her and I was like, you know what, I already have a lot of Flytraps, so I don't really need one. But then I thought, what a great video it would be, because I know lots of you guys are seeing these little guys in stacks in the dark at Home Depot, and you love these carnivorous plants now, and you're like, how can I save these poor little buggers? So we're just gonna go over that. We're gonna do it from a beginner's perspective, so forgive me if you already know some of this, but I really want to get like any random person who's wandering into Home Depot to save as many Venus Flytraps as they can and give them all the information they can to do that. So first off, it comes in this horrible little thing. This is nice for shipping them and getting them to the hardware store or the big box store where you found them. And it gives the idea that maybe they're tropical plants and maybe they need this high humidity to thrive. It's not really true. It's a misleading idea. Carnivores, or Venus Flytraps rather, are native to North and South Carolina. So they're actually temperate plants that appreciate high humidity, but that's not required. And they definitely don't need this thing here. So in fact, if you put this in the right amount of sun, with this all sealed up, you're probably gonna steam and cook the whole thing. It's gonna be like 120 degrees in here in the sun before you know it. Even though there are some little holes in there, it's not gonna do very much. So let's get it out of there. Kind of tricky too. Uh-oh. Should have practiced this before we started. This is the most key part. Well, the horrible little pot has stayed. Let's see if I can get that out. There we go. So, this isn't the worst situation, actually. They don't need huge pots. I'm only gonna put it in a slightly bigger pot. This looks like it's pure peat moss, probably not the highest quality peat moss, and no perlite. So it's a little bit different than what we would use here. We only use the highest quality peat moss money can buy. And while I'm talking about this, I would say, you know, rescuing little Venus Flytraps like this is super fun. But if you're actually looking for like a really healthy plant, when you're buying plants, they're not all the same. So if this thing's been tortured in the dark and getting tap water with poor instructions on it, you're not setting yourself up for success. So I would really recommend getting it from us or possibly any other reputable carnivorous plant dealer, but mostly us if you want a really great start to a Flytrap. That being said, here's an okay start to a Flytrap. You can see it's pretty small, although all plants grow, so there's hope for this guy yet, but it's not the biggest thing. It'd be pretty hard pressed to feed any of those little traps there. And then I did want to take a look at the instructions on the packaging and see if we could find what's wrong with this. So, it says a Venus Flytrap, a carnivorous plant that attracts small insects with sweet-smelling nectar, then snaps shut and digests the meal. It's pretty much true. I've never really noticed much of a sweet smell, but maybe there is. It says water. Keep planting mix moist but not soggy. Distilled water recommended. Distilled water is super recommended. If you just want to have a Venus Flytrap and you're just buying this at Home Depot and you want to put it, a box store, and you want to put it on a windowsill and just play with it for a little while, you could use tap water. But if you really want to rescue this guy, you have to use distilled water, rainwater, really good water. Secondly, it says not soggy. These are from swamps and bogs. Most Venus Flytraps grow in a place called the Green Swamp in North Carolina, and so you can definitely keep them soggy. In fact, I would super recommend when you're done setting it in a little tray of rainwater or distilled water like that all the time, and it could even be all the way full, and you'll almost never rot these things. It's really, really hard. What else we got on here? Light. During the active growing season, Venus Flytraps should receive a minimum of 12 hours of light. A minimum of 4 hours of direct sunlight is recommended. That's confusing. I don't understand that really. It's like a minimum of 4 hours, a minimum of 12 hours. What's the real answer? Venus Flytraps like a lot of sun. If you're planning on growing it indoors, you could on a very sunny windowsill, or if you want to get a YesCom LED light on Amazon, we recommend those. They're very cheap, like $25. Park it above there, and that would allow you to grow this guy inside. But most places, a Venus flytrap would be way happier outdoors in a sunny spot, spring through summer. It doesn't have to be full sun, but at least 4 or 5 hours of direct sun is good. Fertilizer, not needed as the plants get their nutrients from insects. That's mostly true. You could fertilize it a little tiny bit with our Maxi fertilizer, especially if it was in rough shape when you got it. This guy's pretty happy, but if there were no traps on there to feed, a little Maxi fertilizer at 1/4 of a teaspoon per gallon, just barely sprinkled on there once a month, will help pull it out of that death spiral. But feeding them is the best way. So if you could get a tiny little something in there, like a little live insect of some sort, a little tiny mealworm or something, that would be the best way. Actually, I'll set it down, and if you look right up in that tiny traps, already seems like it caught a little fungus gnat that was in that container with it. That's kind of cool. But that might be hard to do. But yeah, if you could feed it, it's gonna grow way faster, way better. Temperatures, and this one's really weird, 65 to 80 degrees. Okay, so they're from North Carolina. Right now in North Carolina, it's colder than 65 degrees, I pretty much guarantee you. And if it's not, it's probably hotter than 80, because in the summer it's real hot, and in the winter it gets pretty cold. So actually I would change that. I would say they're totally fine to 100 degrees. In fact, we have people that are growing them in Phoenix, Arizona, Sacramento, California. You will have to keep it sopping wet and cut back on the sun, just maybe some morning sun only, but the heat is fine. It's very hot there in the summer times. And in the cold, I would drop that all the way down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. They're totally capable of freezing overnight. The water around them can freeze, and they can come right back in the spring after they go dormant, and they do go dormant. There's no mention of that on here, so dormancy is a thing. This is cute Halloween packaging, so that's giving away what time of year this probably is, which means this guy is going to go dormant in like 2 weeks, which is about 2 weeks away from Halloween. So don't be shocked with your little rescue, if you're doing it in the fall, loses all its leaves. You're not failing, you're just letting it have its natural cycle so they can come back bigger and better in the springtime. And then it says continuing care, remove old leaves and traps as they turn black. You can definitely do that. Nobody does that in the wild. I would say of all the instructions that get on here, that's probably, I would have put something more about dormancy and less about that. Personally, no offense to these guys, because they have a different business model. They're mostly selling a take it home and kill it novelty for, $10 now. And for the same $10, you could get a keep it for the rest of your life flytrap from us. Anyways, okay, so now we have this little guy and we want to save him. We could leave it in this actually, especially if it started off looking pretty good like this. I mean, I don't think this has been at the store that long, hasn't been in the dark that long, and it probably hasn't had the chance to get too much tap water on it. But let me tell you something, at the big box store, they're not giving these things distilled water. They're barely even watering the regular plants half the time, in my never to be humble opinion. And so there could be minerals all stored up in this peat moss from the bad water they used, and so we might as well just get it out of there. So that's what we're gonna do. This would be a good opportunity to see what's going on underneath here. Usually if I just pull it in half, we can find the little bulb. There it is. So, Venus flytrap anatomy 101, the top of the plant has these modified leaves for trapping insects. There's a little bulb like this for storing energy over the winter, and there are few scraggly little roots. I think this one only has two little roots. And that's not because it's sad, that's just because Venus flytraps don't ever really have very many roots. I happen to have right here our mix, which is 4 parts peat moss to 1 part perlite, high quality peat moss. We recommend Black Gold or Sunshine as brands. You can usually find those at the same box store, ironically. If you can't, you can order that from us. We sell our carnivorous premium carnivorous plant mix here. So I'm just gonna poke a little hole, my fingy, slide that little guy in, get all those roots underneath. I usually pick a side and push it up against that, and then let's not use that. And come in and push from both angles, and you can see I kind of, it's all right to push on the center of the plant, it's just fine. And push very firmly. Oh, the bubbles come out. Ta-da-dee, da-da-doo. So now that guy's all set up for success, and it wasn't that hard. So we're just gonna put him in the little saucer like that. This is some good water from the nursery, and we're just gonna fill it up right to there. And then we're gonna put that in a nice sunny spot outside. So don't be shocked when all of these leaves burn off, even without dormancy. Even if you're doing it in the springtime, even in the middle of the summer, these leaves have grown under the indoor conditions of that box store they were growing at, and they're probably too fair to be out in the proper amount of sun. That doesn't mean that when you put it out there and it takes all those leaves get burned off, that you put it in too much sun. It just means that it wasn't ready for the right amount of sun. So don't freak out when it's all burned off. That's part of the rescuing process. Again, if you got a great fly trap from us, there'd be less of this rescuing process. But we're rescuing, remember? So it's less than ideal. So if I put that outside right now, expect all those to burn off. And then from the very center, new traps will start to unfurl, and those will be adjusted to their new home ever after. And after that, you officially rescued your first box store fly trap. The other thing about a big box store is you're not gonna find the same diversity. So don't expect this to be a B52 or a Sam fly trap or one of the really great creations that we've made here. This is what we would call just a typical fly trap. But what we mean by typical is it's pretty much close to what you'd find in the wild. It just has eyelashes, no weird mutations, just kind of has orangey to red interiors, not all red, not giant, just typical. Now that you know how, I encourage you to save dozens and dozens. You'll always find them there. And here's another deep secret. If you find them when they're really sad and almost dead, and you find some employee, just ask them what they're going to do with those. Half the time they're about to throw them away, and the nice employees will sometimes give them to you. I've heard lots of stories from customers who said, oh, I just asked them about those, and they just gave them all these fly traps. So sometimes just ask, but if not, it's totally worth the $10 to get a great fly trap. And then if you guys have any more questions that weren't covered in this video, such as dormancy or the really deep delving stuff, and you're sitting there going, but he didn't answer this, go to our ultimate care guide on Venus fly traps, and while you're there, check out all of our other ultimate care guides.